Anyway, for the final week of Celtic Women, Cheryl Beer is here in the studio, so I'm going to now hand the mic over to Cheryl, who's going to explain more and talk to the final guest who's appearing on Sunday and Monday's event. Thank you, Cheryl.
Hello, Paul. Nice to see you, lovely.
And you again.
Did you have a lovely holiday?
Yes, thanks. Really enjoyed.
Fabulous. Well, it's nice to be here at Radio Tircoed. Thanks for having me, everybody. Yes, this is the last Wednesday before Celtic Womenfest 2012. That's Sunday the 26th and Monday the 27th of August on the bank holiday at the National Botanic Garden of Wales. Now then, it has actually become the biggest all-women festival lineup, not just in Wales but in the UK this year. We have almost 60 acts playing over the 2 days. Lots of people have joined us this week that we're really excited about. Tina Gould has offered Tai Chi in the garden. Really beautiful person with a wonderful aura. I've worked with Tina lots of times and every time is magical. And also Leah Wakeman has joined Celtic Womenfest. She's going to be offering circus skills for the children on the Monday afternoon, which will be fabulous. So all of that alongside the music and the poetry. On the Sunday, we're going to be opening with a Bi-lingual welcome from the Deputy Mayoress, Ruth Price, and a lovely poem written by Simone Mansell-Broom from the Cerridwen Centre. Our first musician to kick off the festival is our very own Gemma Kreiser from Swansea. I suppose lots of you have heard of her. And that she'll be followed by a whole plethora of people over the 2 days. We've got people like Amy Wadge, who's coming down on the Monday to play for us. Amy is doing so well. She is a presenter, obviously, for the BBC. Songwriter, brilliant in her own right, but just recently co-written an EP with Ed Sheeran. And his website has the EP on there. It's called Songs I Wrote with Amy, and that's our Amy Wadge from Cardiff, who goes way back and actually with me, because me and Amy worked together many years ago. I organised my first women's event, Women in Music and Poetry event at Club Evil Bach in Womanby Street in Cardiff. And Amy came along from college. She was at the Welsh College of Music and Drama at the time. And she came along and played for us there. And here she is, all these years later, coming for me at Celtic Womenfest 2012 at the National Botanic Garden of Wales. And another person who performed on that lineup in Womanby Street all those years ago is Helen Davies. Now, Helen Davies is here, but she has a friend with her who I'm going to speak to first. And I believe that it is Queen Elizabeth I.
Good morning, bore da i chi.
Well, Queen Elizabeth, ma'am, I had no idea that you were Welsh speaking.
Yes, I was taught by my servant, Blanche Parry. I had my father's permission to be taught Welsh, as of course my grandfather was Welsh.
I didn't know that. Who was your grandfather then, Queen Elizabeth?
Henry VII.
Oh, Henry VII. Then
Yes.
Did he speak Welsh then?
Yes, he did, yes.
And did he speak with you, my lady?
No, I didn't know my grandfather, but I was taught Welsh by Blanche Parry and spoke Welsh to her, and of course to my manservant, John Parry.
So are you fluent then?
Oh, yes, of course.
Do you have any poems in Welsh, though?
I have never actually written poems in Welsh. I've written them in Greek and in Latin and in Italian, and have translated many works from Greek and Latin into English. And I have written poetry myself in English.
Oh, really? Well, I don't think many people know that about you, Queen Elizabeth I, that you are actually a very clever poet.
I am indeed, but thank you for your observation. You are no doubt a very witty young lady.
Are you going to read one of your poems for us?
I am indeed. This is The Doubt of Future Foes.
Written by yourself, Queen
Indeed,
Elizabeth I.
yes.
And what year would that have been in, Queen Elizabeth?
This is in the mid-1500s. The doubt of future foals exiles my present joy, and wit me warns to shun such snares as threaten mine annoy. For falsehood doth now flow, and subjects' faith doth ebb, which should not be, if reason ruled or wisdom weaved the web. But clouds of joy untried do cloak aspiring minds, which turn to rain of late, repent by changed course of winds. And top of hope suppose the root of rue shall be, and fruitless all their gratuite guile, as shortly ye shall see. The dazzled eyes with pride which great ambition blinds shall be unsealed by worthy wights whose foresight falsehood finds. The daughter of debate that discord eye doth sow shall reap no gain where former rule still peatheth taught to know, nor foreign banished wight shall anchor in this port. Our realm brooks not seditious sex, let them elsewhere retort. My rusty sword through rest shall first his edge employ to poll their tops that seek such change, or gape for future joy.
Well, thank you very much, Queen Elizabeth I.
You are welcome, my dear.
And why do you think it's important for you to come to Celtic Womenfest 2012, Queen Elizabeth?
Women have always been suppressed in their desires to create publicly. I myself had to keep much of my poetry secret, for it was not considered polite for women to write poetry, or indeed to sing, or to dance, or to do anything which showed their creative talents. So I wish to lead the way for women in this country to show that, yes, we can create. We can be the equal of men in our creative arts.
So you're going to be opening for us in Welsh on the Monday.
I am, yes.
And are you bringing your friend Helen Davies with you?
I am indeed, for she too is a worthy wit.
And, oh, here she is now. Hello, Helen.
Bore dag.
Morning. How are you, lovely?
I am fine, thank you.
And you come trekking all the way over from Aberdeen for this morning.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming to Celtic Womenfest 2012 this weekend as Queen Elizabeth I. You're going to be dressed?
I am, yes, with the full white makeup and orange hair and and the bum roll.
Along with yourself and Queen Elizabeth I, we have all these musicians and quite a striking poetry crew for the weekend. We've got Mab Jones, who is the poet in residence for the National Botanic Garden of Wales, Rhian Edwards, who's this year's John Tripp Award winner, and her book Clueless Dogs has just been shortlisted for a Forward Prize as Best Newcomer. We've got Susie Wilde, the Associate Editor with Parthian Press. So, you know, there's very impressive poets, but we've also got up-and-coming poets like Donna Howell, Jane Purnell, Angela Brunt is reading for us, Madge Ickle, Dawn Passmore, as I said earlier, Simone. We've got Sam Collins, Pauline Selston, Rachel Auckland, a whole plethora of poets. So I think, you know, obviously women have a long history in poetry that perhaps isn't seen in the same way as men's history. And you've brought along some stuff from the war periods, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been writing poetry in Welsh myself for the last year or so. And because Welsh is my second language, but I'm sort of developing it. And as I was studying women's poetry, I started to think, well, where are these women poets that there are lots of male poets represented throughout the ages? Well, surely women must have written poetry too. And I went looking and found that there's poetry recorded from women for the last 3,000 years. In Greek, in Latin, from right across the world. And I was particularly interested in the First World War poets. I studied the First World War poets when I was at school, Sir Maith and all, a long time ago. But we didn't study any women's poetry. And I thought, well, were women silent throughout the whole of the First World War? So I went looking and found that there are lots of First World War women poets, but their poetry is very different to the poetry that was produced by men during the First World War.
What do you see as the difference there, then?
The men's poetry is very physical. It's about the blood, the guts, the absolute horror of war. As the war progressed, obviously at the beginning of the war you had sort of Rupert Brooke and poets like that were talking about how heroic it was to go to war until they actually got to the trenches and saw that that's not what it was like at all. But whereas the men's poets, they dwell on the physicality of it, when you look at the women's poetry, it's more to do with the psyche, with the emotions, the way people were affected by the war, about broken hearts and tenderness, and the way the war affected them. And it's much more emotional, much more tender. And I have to say that as I was trawling through this poetry, I sat there and cried for a good 2 hours because it was just so moving.
And you've brought some examples with you today.
I have, yes. Let me find the first bits. The first one that I've got, I think, is a very, very moving piece.
Is this the one from the Nurses in the Hospital?
It is, yes. This is by Vera Brittain. Now, Vera Brittain is perhaps best known as the writer of Testament of Youth, as she worked as a nurse right the way through the First World War. And I hadn't realised until coming to look that she actually wrote a lot of poetry as well. And this poem is called The German Ward, where she's talking about serving as a nurse in France in the First World War, looking after the German soldiers rather than the British soldiers.
That's a very interesting insight. And I've got my uke with me, Helen, so I'll have a little play while you're reading.
Okay.
I can hear everybody out there slurping their cups of tea. Can you, Helen? I wonder if they'll be doing that on the wards now.
We shall see. Yeah. So this is The German Ward by Vera Brittain. When the years of strife are over, and my recollection fades of the wards wherein I worked the weeks away, I shall still see, as a vision's rising mid the wartime shades, the ward in France where the German wounded lay. I shall see the pallid faces, the half-suspicious eyes. I shall hear the bitter groans and laboured breath, and recall the loud complaining and the weary, tedious cries, and the sights and smells of blood and wounds and death. I shall see the convoy cases, blanket covered on the floor, and watch the heavy stretcher work begin, and the gleam of knives and bottles through the open theatre door, and the operation patients carried in. I shall see the sister standing, with her form of youthful grace, and the humour and the wisdom of the smile, and the tale of 3 years' warfare on her thin, expressive face, the weariness of many a toil-filled while. I shall think how I worked for her with nerve and heart and mind, and marvelled at her courage and her skill, and how the dying enemy her tenderness would find beneath her scornful energy of will. And I learnt that human mercy turns alike to friend or foe when the darkest hour of all is creeping nigh, and those who slew our dearest when their lamps were burning low found help and pity ere they came to die. So, though much will be forgotten when the sound of war's alarms and the days of death and strife have passed away, I shall always see the vision of love working amidst arms in the ward wherein the wounded prisoners lay.
Wow, Helen, what a beautiful piece, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that...
It's so telling.
I'd never thought of our nurses looking after the enemy soldiers. It had never occurred to me. I'm sure it must have happened in the Second World War as well. But, and that thought that their instinct as nurses, as women, was to care for those that were injured and dying as they would care for their own.
And hope that their own were cared for in the same way, yes. Very, very moving. And that is the thing about poetry and music, is that it can convey so much. and it kind of knows no boundary. We've got some amazing women who just write the most incredible pieces in the here and now, in today, who are following in this long tradition that women have of being creative at the festival, at Celtic Womenfest 2012. We've got Sian James coming with Celtic.
She is brilliant.
On the Welsh harp. Absolutely fantastic. Jen Wilson, and she's got Margot Morgan with her. Jen has been a jazz musician. She's from Swansea here and has been at the forefront of women's jazz for over 50 years. And Margot's coming with her to do the collection of Dylan Thomas poems over the top of jazz music. And that was Jen's first album when she was 60. So, you know, people think, how old are you when you make your first album? You can be any age when you make your first album or publish your first book. You've got a book out at the moment, haven't you, Helen?
Yeah, it came up a few years ago that I entered a competition with the BBC, and at the time I thought it was a writing competition. It was called End of Story, where they had a number of leading writers who had written the beginning of a short story, and they asked people to write the second half. So a friend of mine drew my attention to it, and when you're a wife and a mother, you try and push your children's dreams, your husband's dreams, and I got to my middle 40s and thought, how about mine? And they'd been on the back burner for a long, long time. I used to write when I was younger, but I'd written songs and performed them for years, but I hadn't written any poetry, I hadn't written any short stories for 20 years or more. So I thought, well, okay, this will kickstart me into getting going again. So I put the thing in the envelope, sent it off, and didn't think anything of it until I had a phone call the week before we were supposed to be performing in the Eisteddfod, and my husband said, it's the BBC on the phone. So I thought, it's about the Eisteddfod, and picked up the phone expecting to hear a torrent of Welsh coming at me, but no, it was BBC Scotland. Wow. And they said, you entered our short story competition, and I said, yes, I did. And she said, well, I'd like to tell you that we had over 17,000 entries, and you've made the final 6.
Oh my goodness.
And that was the second time in my life when I was lost for words. The first time was when I first set eyes on my husband. So eventually they came out to the funny story for you. They said, we're coming to your house on Monday to film. Now, what would your reaction be if you were told the BBC were coming to film in your house in 2 days' time?
I do the dishes for the start now. Yeah.
I cleaned that house within an inch of its life. At the time, my daughter had recently come home from university, and any of you that have had children come home from university know that university digs are like the TARDIS. That a small amount of stuff goes in it and 10 times the amount comes back home. So we'd got everything all over the house. And the story that I'd written was to end a story by Marion Keyes called A Woman's Right to Shoes was the story. So they asked me why I had picked this particular story, and I said, well, the title drew me straight away because I am the Imelda Marcos of the South Wales Valleys. I have summer shoes, I have winter shoes, I have boots, I have sandals, and they're under the bed, they're in the wardrobe, they're in the attic, they're all over the place. Now, before the BBC had arrived, I'd said to my husband, we're just not going to have time to sort all of this out. And he said, well, don't worry. We'll stick everything in our room and shut the door on it. They're not going to film up there. So, of course, when I was talking about my shoes, what did the interviewer say? But can we go upstairs and film your shoes? So I said, no, we can't possibly do that. And then I got, a few minutes later, a thumbs up from my husband to say, yes, it's all right for you to go upstairs and film. And I thought, what on earth have they done? Got upstairs to our room. It was immaculate. And what he'd done, he'd opened all the drawers, all the cupboards, just got his arm and swept everything into it. Do you know, it was 4 months before I found my wristwatch. It was in his sock drawer. But that was my fun with the BBC.
Wow. But well done. Didn't you get into the final 3 as well?
I did, yes. I got into the final 3, and out of the 3, I was the only person that actually went on to write a novel.
Well done. And we can talk about that after the adverts that I believe will be coming up in a moment. Don't forget, this is Celtic Womenfest 2012 on Radio Tircoed with Cheryl Beer and Helen Davies. Okay. Your boys with you. Because it's a family weekend. So you're very, very welcome to come. We can't wait to see you. That's 2 days of music and poetry on the 26th and the 27th of August. That's this bank holiday weekend. Helen, thank you so much for coming down from Aberdare.
You're welcome.
We're going to finish now, aren't we, with a Welsh language poem that you've written yourself.
Yeah, I wrote this for the poet Cyril Jones on his 65th birthday. Basically, the poem is saying that age is a wonderful thing because it gives you the wisdom to light the way for future generations.
It certainly does, and I can speak.
Yeah, me too.
And I'll have a little twiddle with you.
Okay. I'r bardd ar ei benblwydd. Beth yw oedran? Nid y rhif wedi glido ar gerdyn rhad ag odl wan. Nid y ganwyll fechan ar gachgen penblwydd. Ond canwyll yw oedran, i olynu'r ffordd i'r rai sy'n dyfod, rhag iddyn nhw faglu yn y tywyllwch. Ymenedd yw oedran, i addysgu'r deryn ansicr, hyfforddi'r adenydd i'r hediad hyderus. Doethineb yw oedran. Ffrwythau bach sydd ar goedan ifanc, a'i changhennau'n rhy wan i ddal pwysau profiad. Dim ond y goedan aiddfed sy'n drwm yn ei hydref ar y falau melysaf. A chaiff cenedlaethau flasu ei chynhaiaf.
Oh, wow, Helen, that was just amazing.
Thank you.
And you're working very hard at the moment with your creative writing masters, I believe.
So the creative module, a creative writing module that would be part of a Welsh language degree, but I'm just doing the creative writing option. So
you've been teaching Welsh for many
20 odd years. I've been teaching Welsh to adults.
To the Eisteddfod.
Yeah.
Helen, we've had a long career journey
we have
together,
indeed.
And I'm so grateful for you coming, and Queen Elizabeth I, of course, to Celtic Womenfest 2012. You can catch Helen on the Monday morning, opening musically for us on the Monday morning. We've got Claire Axtell, Esther Kane, Emma Payne, Avril Harwood, Stephanie Finnegan, Stacey Cohen. Please, if you want to know the full lineup, go to Celtic Womenfest at blogspot.co.uk. Massive, massive thank you to the National Botanic Garden of Wales for funding the infrastructure of the festival and giving us the venue, particularly to David Hardy, who's the marketing and communications manager, as well as the events programmer. And thank you, Radio Tircoed.